So it started with this unique hook of grabbing attention, of generating 1 million followers in 30 days. Now, if I would have went out and had a book or something that said social media expert or social media marketing tactics or expert social media marketing stuff or follower growth or how to get more engagement, that's been said millions of times. I'm not going to stand out. I'm not going to differentiate myself. But what I did is I started with a hook to bring people in. And the hook was I generated 1 million followers in 30 days. That's it.
Welcome to the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast. Let's get into the show.
Hey everyone, this is Agostino. A lot of people know who they are and what they do, and a few even know why they do it. But even when brands have clarity in these areas, they often struggle to grab an audience's attention. Others have amazing products or services that fail to achieve great success because they don't know how to talk about what they do effectively. And this is because digital and social media have reshaped our world into one of micro attention. Well, today's guest understands this very, very well. With over 10 years of experience in digital, he has driven value for some of the most respected global brands. He has worked on innovation as an innovation strategist for Fortune 500 corporations, brands, celebrities, helping them unlock value to transform their businesses. He started his career at Lakeshore Entertainment, where he oversaw all aspects of the interactive media strategy. He's worked on 16 movies that generated worldwide gross of $685 million and has pioneered the first ever influencer campaign to effectively promote Lakeshore's movies. He went on to build social media applications and digital platforms for celebrity clients such as Taylor Swift, Rihanna, and Jason Statham, and supermodel Adriana Lima as well. He has served as the VP for digital for Paramount Pictures and has helped scale one of the largest social optimization firms in the world that has worked with brands such as Disney, Fox, NBC, Netflix, and LinkedIn, among many other Fortune 500. He is the author of Hook Point, How to Stand Out in a 3-Second World, a book you should definitely check out. Now, with all that, I'd like to welcome Brendan Kane to the show. Brendan, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me. It's true pleasure to connect with you and all of your influencers or all the listeners that you guys have.
Yeah, thanks. No, I think it's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. Now, guys, if you like what Brendan has to say, you should definitely check out his contact page at brendankane.com. And if you like our content, please don't forget to leave a comment and rate the show. It helps us out tremendously when you do. Finally, if you text the word freedom to 202-410-4202, you get our free ebook, The Bulletproof Guide to Finding a Broker. Okay, Brendan, go ahead and tell the listeners about today's marketplace and how to get attention out there, because it really is a tough world out there when it comes to getting people's attention.
Yeah, so some interesting and pretty crazy statistics. So first off, there's over 60 billion messages sent out on digital platforms each day between social media, email, text, push notifications. And on top of that, there was a Forbes article that was released that had another insane statistic that the average person's exposed to between 4,000 and 10,000 ads a day. So with all of that, the landscape is considerably shifted. No longer are you competing against just your direct competition. You're competing against every piece of content. It's like, if we're talking about social media or digital platforms, you're competing against LeBron James, Kim Kardashian, Netflix, and ESPN. And because of that, it makes it much more difficult because the world has become oversaturated and overcrowded. Again, not just from competition, but the amount of content that's out there in the world. So if you really want to succeed and take your brand, your business, your service to the next level, you have to find that way to stand out above all of the noise to drive people into the conversation. And that's where we came up with this concept of a hook point. And a hook point means simply grabbing attention. We firmly believe that in the world that we live in today, you have 3 to 5 seconds max to grab somebody's attention, to then earn the right for the next 15, 30, and 60 seconds. And where most people go wrong is they're trying to start a conversation thinking they've already won the attention of the person on the other side of the screen or the other side of the ad or the other side of the table, when they really need to be focusing on, how do I differentiate myself? How do I position myself in those first 3 to 5 seconds that somebody even cares enough to pay attention to the next part of the message or to your purpose or your why or the value that you drive.
Yeah. And I think, well, part of it though, at least as far as I know anyway, and this is just through my interactions with investors and going out and trying to raise money or whatever it might be that I'm trying to do, is I often try to make whatever it is I'm going to say pertinent to them, like specifically, even before I even say my name. In most cases, I just like sometimes it's the only way, right? I mean, do you have any other recommendations? Like, how do you do that? Like, how do you get in front of them and get them to engage? Because that's a very short period of time. 3 to 5 seconds is not a lot of time.
Yeah, and I think you hit something in the head that I want to call out is that you said that oftentimes you don't even start with your name. And that's a huge mistake that we see people in creating social media content. They'll just say, "Hey, I'm Brendan Kane, and today I'm going to talk to you." You've lost them already. It's like the attention span is so short. Like, how do you drive people in? And so you ask, like, how do you actually achieve this? So in the book, we break down a 5-step framework to do it, and I'll talk about some of those different elements and ways that you can approach it. The biggest thing that I find is when we work with our private clients, and even for our own brand and products or service, oftentimes people focus mainly on the content when really it's the context that you wrap it around that determines whether or not you're successful. So when we work with clients, we're not changing who they are, what they say, or any of that. We're changing how they say it, how they represent it. Because the biggest mistake that people make in the world today is they are saying the same thing in the same way as everybody else. And if somebody sees that, automatically they are going to scroll past that because they already know what you're going to say, and thus they don't need to stop to see what it's about. So I don't have a particular case for real estate. I'll start with another case, and then maybe we can apply it to real estate, and you can give me some guidance on terms and stuff. But let's just start with myself, for example. So I'm in digital and business strategy. Now, if you type in digital or social media marketing or business strategy, there's tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of results that come up in, in Google search. So I knew I needed to find a way to stand out to grab people's attention. Because if I went out into the market and just say, "Hey, I'm a business strategist," or "I'm social media expert or digital expert," there's nobody's going to pay attention because there's so many people that speak that way. So what I did is I created a hook point for myself of generating 1 million followers in 30 days. And I did it not from the standpoint of could I do it? It's why I should do it. And why I did it is because I knew it was a strong hook point to have a larger conversation with people. So that hook I brought to a literary agent. I said, if I do this, if I generate 1 million followers in 30 days, will you sign me as a client and will you get me a publishing deal? And he said yes. Because from there, that was a starting point to have a larger conversation because I knew if I signed with a literary agent, it would lead to a publishing deal. And I knew having a published book would lead to podcast interviews, speaking on stages in front of thousands of people, getting on television, getting into print publications. So it started with this unique hook of grabbing attention, of generating 1 million followers in 30 days. Now, if I would have went out and had a book or something that said social media expert or social media marketing tactics or expert social media marketing stuff or follower growth or how to get more engagement, that's been said millions of times. I'm not going to stand out. I'm not going to differentiate myself. But what I did is I started with a hook to bring people in. And the hook was I generated 1 million followers in 30 days. That's it. But it got people to stop, to the point where I don't know what the total, I haven't got the latest royalty report, but I think we're over 70,000 books sold. I've had over 16,000 people apply to work with me. I've been on hundreds of podcasts, television, spoken on stages in front of 7,000 people, not because I'm the smartest guy in the room. It's because I positioned myself in a different way that made me stand out amongst the noise and amongst the clutter. So when we talk about like real estate, for example, you're talking about how do I close deals for investments? How do I stand out to get more deals or things of that nature? Is how do we flip it on its head and say things about you in a completely different way than everybody else so you don't get lumped into the crowd.
And you know what though, Brendan? I think it's one thing that many people are probably going up against right now is that there are so many people now getting into the space, right? And it's a world of sameness. I think one thing that you pointed out is how do you be different? Because one of the things that the human brain is really, really good at is detecting differences. And if something is different, the brain catches it and it brings it to the forefront to understand what is this? Why is this different? Right? It's one of the inherent things of being a human. And I think that's one thing. And I think in a world of sameness, you're able to be different. That is one way to get that attention fairly quickly. But then it comes down to great. So you get their attention. What are you going to say? What are the first words they're going to say when you open up your mouth? And that's going to be the kicker, right? Is it going to be something realistic? Is it gonna, like because as you can imagine, a lot of what is, I guess, important to an investor is their investment going to be safe? Is it going to be secured? What type of return am I going to get? That's some of the things that they care about. And also, who am I investing with, right? And if you're not able to convey this in a clear and concise way, in a way that's compelling, and also in a way that gives that person confidence you're going to perform, you're not going to win that deal. You're not going to get that. You're not going to get that money from the investor. They're not going to want to invest with you, right? So that's there's a lot there, and so I'm not sure how would you package something like that up?
Yeah. So first off, just looking at it, it's very simple. You got to differentiate yourself, but simple does not necessarily mean easy. It's like myself and my team have 15 years of experience doing this. And that's one of the reasons I created an agency around this core concept of helping people differentiate themselves. Because one of the challenges that people run into, especially very successful people, is it comes so intuitively to them, or they've been doing it so long that they don't know how to distill it down into a unique way or to distill it down into its simplest form to capture that attention. Most people over give too much information or try and give a long-winded pitch or idea of who they are instead of really simplifying that down. So there's a few ways that we go about it. Is one of the biggest things that I do in the process of helping people develop hook points is I will sit there and I will just listen to them and pull something out of them. So, for example, I have a client based out of Qatar that is a big real estate development person, and in talking to him and listening to him, he said something that I turned into the hook for him. He said, "I've generated $1 billion worth of real estate development deals, but I don't approach it the same as everybody else. I approach it differently. I'm not this suit and tie guy that's all buttoned up and all of that. I have more of a jeans and t-shirt approach to how I look at things, and that's what's really driven my success. Is I have more of this kind of Silicon Valley entrepreneurial approach to it." And I said, "Okay, that is different. So what I want your hook to be is $1 billion generated in nothing but a jeans and t-shirt, because that is what's going to differentiate him and be like, what? $1 billion in a jeans and a t-shirt? It's going to make you say like, well, I want to hear what this guy is about. So now we're contextualizing that around a book. He's getting podcast interviews doing that. And then it can bring into that deeper level. But if he started like, hey, I'm a real estate development guy out of Qatar, or I do real estate development around commercial property, it's like, okay, there's a million other people that do that. So, what is it that really makes you unique? What is really differentiates you from everybody else? And that can be anything. It could be your approach. It can be a story from your background or a methodology that you use that differentiates you to demonstrate that people should pay attention. And then secondarily, that's when the trust comes into play. People oftentimes are trying to achieve trust with that initial 3 to 5 seconds, and it's very difficult to do that because how many people do you meet that you automatically trust in the first 3 to 5 seconds? It's like pretty much nobody. It's
Right.
like they need to earn that right. So What I would focus on really is what is your differentiating factor that brings people into the larger conversation you want to have. And then through that larger conversation and that story that you tell, then you can earn that trust and credibility. So we have three pillars to creating a successful hook point. So number one is that grabbing the attention, which we've already talked about. Number two is what is the story that you tell them once you have that attention. So that is like 1 million followers in 30 days. Okay, then people want to know, how did you do it? So then I tell the story about how I do it. And then the third pillar is that trust and credibility. Is what you're saying authentic? Is it ring true? Do people believe it? Because if you don't have any one of these three pillars, you fall flat. So you can't, like, if you can't grab somebody's attention, nobody's going to get to your story. Nobody's going to determine whether they trust you. If you get to the story and the story's not good, then it's going to fall flat. You're going to lose that attention. And three, if you grab attention and the story doesn't ring true and you don't build that trust and credibility, then it falls flat. And that's like the big thing is I'm not talking about clickbait here. And that's why we've had success and our clients have success is because we're focusing on all three pillars of that conversation, of that developing the hook point all the way through the process.
Excellent. Now, at what point are you doing the quote, "What's in it for me" type scenario? Like, at what point are you weaving that message into your delivery? Is it at one of the three pillars, or is it after that?
In terms of what we're doing for the client,
Yes.
well, we tie in what are the outcomes that people are looking for. That's one of the elements that we really think about in terms of developing that hook is like 1 million followers in 30 days plays into what most people are looking for. They're looking for validation, credibility, more audience, and they think followers is going to solve that problem for them. So we always are looking for the outcomes that people are looking for. But again, we don't start out by saying, I'm going to provide value by doing X, Y, and Z. That
Mm.
is not strong enough. It's how do you essentially imply the value and what's in it for them through the hook and through the story that you tell. Because I never like in all the deals that I've closed, um, whether it's an MTV, a Taylor Swift, a Disney, an Xbox, I am never going in and selling anything. I'm simply starting with a hook to grab their attention and I'm telling a story. And then that will lead to them saying, okay, how can we hire you? How can we work with you? I think at least from my experience, it's far more valuable and you acquire more business if you take that approach rather than I'm going in and I'm going to sell this person. I'm going to go in and pitch this person. That's where it typically falls flat. And I can give you an example is like when we were going out and having meetings with Netflix and Disney and all these big corporations, we initially started with a deck presentation. And then we quickly realized that deck presentation gets you into so much trouble because what you do is it takes you out of the process of understanding the person on the other side of the table, understanding what their challenges are or how they perceive their challenges. And the moment you get stuck in a presentation or a deck, it gives you very little wiggle room to transition your story, to transition how you're providing value or service. So again, what we do now is I never go in with a deck presentation. I never go in with a demo. I always start if I'm doing an in-person meeting or an in-person deal or an interview. What is that person? What is their roles? What are the challenges? What are their goals? How do they perceive certain situations? And that gives me enough information on how I can best position my hook or my story to really resonate and close with the other person on the other side of the table.
Oh man, that's huge. I mean, the going in with the deck is the way that we've all been told to do it, right? You go in with your computer, your PowerPoint slides, and you're hitting the button, and you're going to the next slide, and you're explaining what the slide is, right? As opposed to finding out what's important to that specific individual. So, how do you pull that information out? So it sounds to me like you're determining what is important to that person on the other side of that table. So maybe they are with Netflix, right? Let's say it is Netflix, right? But it's an individual that represents Netflix. So are you like opening up and before you even begin your pitch, so to speak, are you getting that information from them first? Like, how do you determine what is important to them and then tailor what your discussion point is going to be?
So it's fact finding mission. So it's starting with, okay, what is their role and their responsibility? Now, you may know that going in, and then it's going into, okay, what do you perceive as your greatest challenges? What are the biggest problems you're facing in your current role today? That right there will, that question alone will tell you so much about who this person is, what they perceive as valuable, what they don't perceive as valuable. And then once you, at a very high level, once you understand what their pain points are or the biggest problem they're trying to overcome, if you then go to them and say, listen, if I can solve that problem for you, would that be valuable to you? And who's going to say no to that? Especially for somebody that works for a big organization, they have bosses that they need to appease or show success to. Or in your case, you may be working with people that have real estate funds or people within an organization that serve investors. There again, it's like, what is their biggest challenge right now? What are their investors looking for? What are their bosses looking for? Because then that can tell you so much. Another analogy is when I started off in the movie industry, I would sit in on pitch meetings with producers. And one of the things that I always learned is if you're going in to pitch a movie, you better have six other movies to pitch. Because if you walk in that door with a comedy and that producer or studio is like, we're only looking for horror films, that meeting is over immediately. And it's the same thing with going in for real estate is you should have different deals or different opportunities. So when you're sitting in that meeting, you have flexibility to shift gears, to shift your hook, to shift your story based upon the data and the feedback that somebody else is giving to you on the other side of the table as well.
Excellent. Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. But I think one thing that totally resonates with, with my personal experience too is determining what the other person needs, what is troubling them, and how do you deliver that solution to them. That is how you build that trust before you even begin your pitch, right? So let's say, for instance, you are talking to an investor. What is important to that investor? Are they looking to retire early? Are they looking to keep working to those 60? Maybe they don't have enough money saved up for retirement, or maybe they want to store, maybe they're worried about getting their kids educated and want to set aside some money for their education, for their kids' education. How do you solve that problem? Specifically, how do you solve that problem? And by creating, it's kind of like what you just said, Brendan. It's like having different vehicles to bridge each one of these different problems, because not all the same thing, the same vehicle in terms of real estate is going to solve all these problems. They're very different things, right?
Definitely. And we even take it a step further. So, a lot of the work that we do is we study human behavior, the subconscious, communication, because what we've realized is you could be sitting on the other side of the table from somebody that perceives the world completely differently than you. And you could both be saying the same thing, but it doesn't land because of the language that you're using. So we've instilled a communication framework called the process communication model in all of the work that we do and with the clients that we work with. And process communication model has been around for over 30 years. It's used by the likes of Pixar, NASA, Bill Clinton, Audi. And what it does is it helps you identify how somebody or a group of people perceive the world. And then you can dictate your language based upon how they perceive the world in order for your message to land. Because we find, again, is like if people perceive the world differently, that's where conflict comes from. That's where misunderstanding comes from. In addition, that we see is sometimes you'll get into a meeting and somebody's in a state of distress. Their psychological needs haven't been met, or they're dealing with anxiety or things like that. And if you want to have success in that meeting, you've got to find a way to get them out of that state of distress so that they can hear you and your message lands. So we layer on multiple different aspects to make sure that your communication is effective and has the highest chance of achieving the goal that you're going into a room or a podcast interview or an ad into, so to make sure that it really successfully articulates your message and connects with the people on the other side.
Oh my God, that's huge. I mean, one of the things that I follow, I have a different model that I follow: practical action, social, emotional. You probably heard of it. It's by another social media influencer, and it sounds very similar, right? And it's simplified, but you're calibrating what you're saying depending on the words and sentences and phrases that the other side is using, right? And depending on what you say and how you say it is going to elicit some sort of reaction out of them. And it's very, very important to track what it is that they're saying. But I think in yours, though, yours sounds like your process sounds much deeper than that, where you're actually even trying to determine, it's almost like a mood set, right? You're trying to determine what their mood is and whether they're in a state of distrust overall. Like if there's something is already bothering them before you walk into the room, right? Is what it sounds like.
Yeah, because if somebody's in a state of distress, and especially in the world that we're living in today, with everything that's happening, there's a lot of people in distress. And if somebody's in distress, they can't really connect. It's hard for them to connect. It's hard for them to really listen to them. And it's gonna be hard to get them to do and perform the action that you're looking for them to perform. So
Mm.
for example, if somebody really views the world through values and opinions, and you go in there and they're in a state of distress, the biggest currency for them is trust. And if you can't build that trust because they're in a state of distress, then there's no way you're going to win that deal. There's no way you're going to get them to make that investment or buy the product or whatever that may be.
Wow. So how do you navigate that? I mean, do you just postpone the meeting for another time? That's probably the
No,
worst thing.
actually not. There's very like simple things that you can do. There's certain phrases you can use, certain words. It doesn't take a tremendous amount to do it. Now, there's certain circumstances where somebody is just not in the right frame of mind, and you should know that. And just say, "Hey, listen, would it be more helpful if we rescheduled that meeting?" Sometimes that does happen, and we will see that. But oftentimes, you can just use certain phrases, questions, positioning your information in a way that really connects with them and brings them out of that state of distress.
Yeah. Yeah. But it sounds to me, Brendan, that in order to effectively utilize this methodology, like anything else, it requires a high degree of practice and training, right? I mean, this isn't something you just read one book and next thing you know, you're a
Yeah,
master at this.
I mean, I've been studying it for 5 years, but I have a member of my team that is one of the top trainers in the world. He's been studying it for 15 years. So that's where it's again, we're helping clients understand it. But we also help, and when we're developing hooks or stories, we understand what their strengths are and what their limitations are as well. And it's purely a math play. Like with the process communication model, there's 6 different ways that people can perceive the world, and there's different numbers associated with it. So, for example, like in North America, 25% of the North American population view the world through thoughts and logic, versus like feelings and emotion, I think is like 30%. People that just view the world through actions is 5%. Values and opinions, it's 10%. So we assess how the client perceives the world. So for example, if we have a client, we just had one yesterday that views the world through values and opinions, we know that they are going to struggle to connect because they're only 10% of the North American population. So we need to work with that person on a hook and a story and their presentation so that they can break out of that 10% and reach like people that view the world through feelings and emotions and thoughts and logic, which the combined two is like over 50% of the North American population. So that's where we kind of play the math numbers to reach people at scale, but also when you're going into that one-on-one is knowing how somebody's perceiving the world so that you can connect with them in a meaningful way.
Wow, that's awesome. Now, are you also helping people fix their inner game as well? Because
Yeah.
much of what you're talking about sounds like perfecting the pitch. And if someone is say values and opinions based, like heavy values and opinions based, that's a fundamental software thing to that person. How do you fix that then? How do you help them adjust and account for any shifts that maybe needs to happen with that specific delivery person's quote air quotes their inner game? How do you do that?
Well, there's a few things. Education and awareness is the number one thing, is just understanding that and breaking and just showing them that that's the way that they communicate, and the the upsides to that communication style and the downsides of that communication style. So first and foremost, just understanding that. Secondarily, in the hooks and the stories and the strategy that we give them, we take that into account, and we help shape it in a way that can help, again, support their strengths and also support their weaknesses. And then third is just practicing, and we give them certain words and certain sentences and questions and phrases to use to really connect on that meaningful level. So, but I also want to say it's not really fixing. I don't want it to come off like it's a problem that we're fixing. It's more of an education and awareness process to take them to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. And I use that word fixing as if as if there's something broken. But yeah, I'm not saying there's something broken. That's a good catch. It's more like
Being more effective,
being
I would
more effective.
yeah.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, because I mean, ultimately, if you're in one state of mind, or you have one, I guess if your psychological beliefs are X, and you're trying to convey a message to people that are of a different belief system, or a different type of I guess different type of a person, you have to calibrate your message, and you have to also calibrate your own internal game to for them to hear you. That's probably the biggest part. But I would say that the practice is probably, I would imagine anyway, the practice would probably be one of the biggest things that really needs to take place. I mean, I mean, I have different things that I do uh, that I've practiced over years, and you know, and every day I'm learning something new about it. You know, every day I'm trying to learn something new about building up my ability to deliver different messages. So how do your what you guys do? How does it differ compared to what other people might do in terms of the practice and the educational side of it?
Well, when we're practicing and when we're educating, it's very specific to their goals. And from a business standpoint, from a brand standpoint, from a personal standpoint. So from when we work with clients, everything that we design to help people stand out and differentiate themselves is taken through that lens of how does this person perceive the world, our client perceive the world, and B, how does the general world perceive certain challenges or obstacles, and we help do a lot of the legwork on creating that communication for them. And then secondarily, we just have ongoing support and training with those clients so that we analyze their content, or we are constantly working with them on their presentation or their video so that they can get more ingrained with it. Because again, it's what I've seen with these things. You kind of need to communicate with people that understand it, because like if you went off and just started talking to a friend about the process communication model framework and they don't have any experience in it, it can kind of fall flat versus working with experts, like my partner that runs that division for our agency, studying it for 15 years, or me studying it for 5 years. Is like we can communicate back and forth and see what's working, what's not working, and making adjustments. And that's where we see people make the most progress in this direction.
Well, I think part of it too, though, is that if when you guys are managing that process for that client, that client is talking to you. You guys are into this. They're into this. So there's a common ground there. If it's just like one of your clients just trying to talk to a buddy about the whole framework, you're right. It's going to absolutely fall flat, because to one person they're trying to better their business. For the other person, it's just noise,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, Brendan, if you had the one piece of bulletproof advice for that person listening, what would you tell them?
The biggest thing is in this world that we live in today is what differentiates you from everybody else. And again, understanding that you're not just competing against your direct competition, you're competing against every piece of content. and really think about it hard, is that everything, and some people will push back on this, but everything's been said, everything's been done. There's no original thought. There's only original ways that you can contextually wrap your message or your content. So it's really do the groundwork and identify what separates you from everybody else, and then test it. Go off and test it, whether it's in boardrooms or with friends or with partners or it's online, and get feedback and see what resonates and keep iterating on that process.
Excellent. All right. Guys, listen, if you want to reach out to Brendan, you can reach him via his website at brendankane.com. Definitely go check out his book as well. I already have a copy of it. It's amazing stuff. All right. I hope you got to see how you can effectively use these strategies to generate new opportunities, innovate and scale your business, and create a compelling personal brand, both online and offline, so you can really thrive in this micro attention world that we live in today. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast.